Hi everyone, my name is Jyoti and I have 10 years of experience in IT. Currently, I'm working as a senior Scrum Master and I have done quite a few certification from PMP to PSM1 to AWS Cloud Practitioner, and I'm also ISTQB certified. Uh, and as I'm passionate about teaching, so every Saturday I do sessions around AWS, and because of that I have been selected as a part of AWS Community Builder Program. Okay, so today I am going to talk about Agile versus Predictive Project approaches. Okay, so let's first understand what do we mean by predictive approach. Another name you would have heard about this approach is waterfall model. So as the name suggests, the approach for this kind of project management is linear, right? So your projects are divided into phases. So first it would be an analysis phase to understand, okay, what is the requirement, what market is looking for, and then you collect requirement by consulting different stakeholders, clients, customers. Okay, so you gather all those requirements, then you start working on the design part. Okay, so if I have to build certain product, okay, how its architecture would be like, what are the key components, okay, are we going to use databases? If yes, what kind of a database I'm going to use, what would be my tech stack? So that comes under the design part. Once that's decided, we go into the implementation, wherein actually developers, they start the development. Okay, so once the development is complete, the project is handed over to the testers or a QA for testing to ensure what was the initial requirement, the product has been built as per that requirement. Okay, and we look out for some bugs. Yeah, so once that done, project is made live and it goes into maintenance phase. So whenever something comes from a customer, there is enhancement request raised and people work on same thing. Yeah, so here you would understand that a lot of upfront planning is required. Okay, and there's no scope for requirement change because everything is moving in a linear fashion. Okay, and cost for change is very high in this kind of approach. In upcoming slides, I'll be giving you a difference with respect to cost, quality, scope whenever a change occurs in either of these project management styles. Okay, so now let's understand why agile or adaptive project management approach came into picture. Okay, so with the predictive, we saw everything was in linear. Okay, you cannot move to the second phase until first phase is done. Okay, and because of that, the feedback which you get is it comes at very late in the cycle, and hence it becomes very costly to go back and redo stuff. Yeah, so we came up with another concept which is agile or adaptive project management, wherein what you do, say for example, I know to build this product from end, yeah, from beginning to the end, it is going to take me 6 months. Okay, so instead of releasing the product after 6 months, what we do, we divide the work into, okay, in 1 month what we want to achieve, and in that 1 month we go by a week. Okay, so in every 2 weeks, which is we call as a iteration, okay, or a sprint. Okay, so after every 2 weeks we produce something. Okay, and then we get it to production. When I say we get it to production, that means, yeah, the project is live and people can start using the product which we have developed after every iteration, and they can always get back to us with the feedback. Okay, so adaptive project management is more about inspecting, adapting with respect to the changes, and it happens very early. So even if you fail, right, so the work which gets hampered is that of just 2 weeks. Okay, so you can always come back and rework on it in the upcoming sprints. Okay, so yeah, so it's iterative. You can constantly incorporate user feedback. Then we do continuous release, right? So after every 2 weeks or after every month, we release whatever we have built. Okay, and the customers or client, they don't have to wait for 6 months to start using your product, because you are doing continuous release. The client can start using the, at least you are able to produce a minimum viable product. Okay, so people can start doing their basic tasks. using that product which you have developed. Now let's understand the difference between both these approaches. So as I told you, the traditional is very sequential, one after another, and with agile you are working in iteration. So if I have to give you an example of predictive and agile approach, take an example of building a house, right? So there we are following a predictive approach by, like, okay, you first build the foundation, then you lay the bricks, then you go ahead and do the electricity work, you paint. Okay, so this is sequential. Okay, until unless foundation work is done, you can't go ahead and start building the walls. Okay, until walls are built, you cannot go ahead and start doing the painting or electricity work, right? But if I have to take same example for agile, herein what you'll do, you are creating, say, a bare skeleton of the house. Okay, and then with every iteration you are strengthening that bare skeleton and adding more and more features. Okay, second is, in case of a traditional, you have to do a lot of work on requirement gathering and planning. Okay, so that needs to be done upfront. But in case of agile, since you're constantly getting time to inspect, adapt, and also feedback from the stakeholders, from the customer, from the user, you always have an opportunity to negotiate or reprioritize the requirement. Okay, and if we talk about the duration, so in case of traditional or predictive approach, you need to do a month of planning, okay, before development begins. So I remember 10 years back when I started my journey as a software engineer in test. So we used to get a requirement. So meanwhile, as a tester, we used to read those requirements, create test cases, brainstorm. Developer used to do the development. Okay, so they used to take 1 or 2 months to complete their development, and then it used to come to our plate for testing. So meanwhile, what we had to do is write our test cases, create some data set, talk to the people, think about the corner cases. But in case of agile approach, everything is happening continuously, right? Developer are developing, testers are writing their tests. They take 2 or 3 days to complete that work, and then it comes to the tester's plate for testing. So in that 2 week of work, you are producing something which is shippable, okay, which can be used by the client. Now let's understand what is the cost of change in both the approaches. So from the graph, you can see that in case of waterfall, there is a huge impact onto the cost for when the change is done, right? So if the change is done around here, right, at the beginning of the project, then the cost is low, pretty low. But if you find something in testing, maybe a tester went ahead and started testing something which was developed after 2 months. There were scenarios in my case wherein project had to be restarted, or they was crashed, because moment it was there in our plate for testing, we used to find some blocker bugs or a crucial bugs which were never mentioned as a part of a requirement. Okay, so then the whole cycle again used to start, like, okay, we used to start doing the brainstorming, then developer used to do the development, and then it used to come to the testing. So there used to be time that some project, though they were slated to go out in 6 months, but they used to take years. And after a year, market used to change, right? The business requirement, or there were competitors who were able to release their project before us. Okay, so they had more transaction and they got more users because of it. But with agile, as I mentioned, that the cost of change is not high, because after every 2 weeks you are reviewing whatever has been built, and then you are sending it out into production, and people are using it. If there is any issue, if there is any change, feedback, it can be incorporated in next iteration. Okay, now question comes, is there any scenario where we should go for a predictive approach, right? So there are still some industries which they continue to use the predictive approach. So those could be like construction, right? The highways which get built, or the buildings which are being built. So there you are going for a predictive approach. Okay. And then you had an existing project. Okay, now you're transitioning it into a new technology. For example, say you were having your data center on premises, and you decide, okay, now we have AWS, Google cloud provider, all those cloud providers. Okay, so you can plan to migrate. So whenever you are migrating to a new technology, okay, you can go ahead with the predictive approach. And also when client or customer says that, okay, there won't be change in the requirement, there won't be change in any scope, for those kind of a project also you can look for predictive approaches. And when to use adaptive approach, a very important thing. See, you cannot know the requirement, all the requirement upfront. It's like, okay, once you start building, you start getting those requirements or clarity around the project. Okay, so if you have minimum idea, basic requirement you have, you can use a adaptive approach, right, where you don't know the end goal. Okay, only now you have visibility of a month or two, but you don't have visibility beyond that for a certain project. So you can always go for adaptive approach. So in that case, even if the project has to be scraped or it has to be stopped, only 1 or 2 months of your work would be impacted. Okay. Yeah, when the project calls for experimental software design, again, you are going to follow from a monolithic. Okay, you had a monolith software, right, and now you're going to break it into microservice architecture, right? So for those who don't know what is monolithic or microservice, understand, if we say monolithic, consider that, okay, you have just one page, and that page is extending as you are writing the code. But in case of microservices, instead of writing the code in just one page, you are dividing it into multiple page, and each page they can work independently. For example, if I talk about shopping e-commerce site, okay, so maybe one code is responsible for login. Okay, so you create one service for login, then there would be another service for searching the product, right? There would be another service to add the product to the cart, for the payment, etc. So for all those, you're not doing everything in a single page. Rather, you are creating multiple pages. So this is very layman definition, but in such scenarios also you can go for experimental software design. Yeah, so that's it. And I am following the Agile. Okay, so Agile is a framework, and under that you have Scrum, you've got Safe. So what I am practicing these days is Scrum. Okay, so thank you everyone. See you in our next session.